Welcome to Lessons from a Cesspit, uncovering the past to plan for the future. This presentation is when toilet humor meets a strategic plan. Hopefully you'll find a case for preservation of the profane and elements, history, and architecture here. Maybe you'll be interested by amateur archaeology and some of the artifacts we're going to discuss. And if nothing else, perhaps you'll enjoy an opportunity for a fun event that has a risk of a few poop jokes. Cesspit, cesspool, the two terms are very closely related, but suffice to say there's an important difference. Cesspits have dry laid joints for the leaching of liquids into the surrounding soils. Cesspools have mortared joints to create a watertight holding tank for liquids. That fact's going to become apparent to us later on. Lesson number one, the process is the project. This is my house in 1982 and 2024. I like it a lot better without the transite tuxedo and the large antenna. I'm very proud of the work I've been doing so far. It's still got a little ways to go. The story starts with a hazard tree and a retaining wall last fall. I noticed there were a whole bunch of carpenter ants starting to eat this trunk, and seeing that it was growing out over the top of this wall, I was getting a little nervous to see which way it was going to fall, hopefully not on my house. The wall itself dates from 1851. It's a result of needing to run the Shoreline Railroad through Fairhaven Heights, and Mr. Allen, who built my house, needing to separate about 50 feet of his backyard from said trains. So I worked with my neighbors. It was a little challenging to get the tree down. Didn't really realize I could fit a bucket truck in my backyard or a logging truck either. But we got the trees down safely. Nobody got hurt other than the trees, which was the plan. But the tree work became some yard work, and the yard work became some drainage work. It became apparent to me when it started to rain that the pipes had been broken. So I started chasing them, seeing them where they'd been crushed, and figuring what I could do to get them back working again. So I went to my big friendly big box store, got myself a pipe, I got a dry well so I could catch a little bit of water before sending it back onto my neighbor's property. I promised him I would fix that. And I thought it would be done in about a day. Lesson number two, the dirty secrets of urban fill. As I started putting my shovel in the ground, it became apparent to me that I wasn't dealing with any old dirt. I had oyster shells, I had coal, I had all sorts of stuff I wasn't expecting to find. I had a veritable museum of coal. I had anthracite, I had lignite, I had clinker, I had bituminous coal, and I had fly ash. All of these things are terribly common in our New Haven soils because, well, people needed cheap stuff to fill stuff in. The oyster shells were a little bit of an unexpected treat. This was never an oyster house, but Miss Huntley, the bride of Mr. Allen, who had built the house, her father was an oyster dealer, and perhaps that's where these came from. These are fairly large oysters, anywhere from 8 to 20 years old, which is not common anymore because our farmed oysters are typically on a dinner table by the time they're 3 or 4 years old. Lesson number three, expect the unexpected. In the course of putting in this dry well, I was testing all the fittings, trying to make sure everything went together, and I was just a few inches too high to make everything work. And as try as I might, I couldn't dig any deeper, and I was hitting something hard, and it didn't want to budge. So I jumped into this hole and put my shovel in the ground and started working at the obstruction to see what it might be. And when the rock fell out, there wasn't any soil behind it. Put my flashlight in, called my wife urgently. She went down the street to get a second shovel from our neighbor, and we started digging, trying to figure out what this might be. We wound up finding more than we bargained for. There was a 100-pound cast iron lid that we managed to get up and out of the ground. And we realized we had found a cesspit. And we knew it was a cesspit because it didn't have any mortar on it. And I was able to take these beautiful, dry laid, very tightly fit stone out and could see into it. So sure enough, we had our waste line coming out of the house, scoped it out, couldn't tell what was going on there. And then this little overflow line going the other way that was completely plugged up with a very dark material that I wasn't going to try to get out. But at least it wasn't actually full of anything else. So that was nice, at least. We did find some interesting artifacts in there. We had this ironstone china, beautiful maker's mark here for the Willits Manufacturing Company out of Trenton, New Jersey, probably part of a pitcher. Whole bunch of mystery porcelain, some very interesting stuff here, possibly part of a jug or a pitcher again. Some plates, some very ornamental stuff with some floral patterns and gilding and other nice details to it. A horseshoe, possibly a railroad spike, also coming out of the pit. A little mystery baggie that doesn't need a whole lot of explaining, and the top of a 1940s whiskey bottle. I was very surprised after all the broken porcelain to pull out this intact Baker's flavoring extract bottle. This is from the early 20th century, probably was used by the wife, Jessie, in her baking. Probably vanilla extract of some sort. My favorite, though, was this pocket door pull from Mallory Wheeler and Company. My wife and I, when we moved into the house, argued whether or not there were any pocket doors left. Checked the casings, couldn't find anything. I came down on team no pocket doors. We dug this out of the cesspit, and I wound up losing that argument. But I'm still married. So we decided that we were going to kind of lean into this, even though we were hoping to dig a dry well, get everything patched, and put it back to rights. We saw an opportunity here to do something interesting, not only for the history of the house, but also something that would just sort of lean into the vibe that we had going, the sort of new and old kind of working together, knowing that we wanted a large open area to infiltrate stormwater from our roof. We decided to remake the cesspit as a dry well and to kind of lean into it and make it a feature in the landscape. That meant I had to patch the hole I made and then test it for water tightness at the next rainstorm. Lesson number 4, using new old ways of building. We went back out to our favorite big box store. We got a couple things to patch and seal the old waste pipe coming out of the house. We got some washed stone delivered, which my son thought was awesome and a lot of fun to play with. We started backfilling the cesspit with the stone and just putting all the pipes back together. We had a little 4-way hub here, pipe going down to drain the water in, inspection port on the top, and then an overflow line going out, should it ever fill up. My mother-in-law and son were very helpful, moving the gravel for us, loading it cartload by cartload, just making sure we got it all done. When we got everything backfilled in, we had another challenge. We fortunately did not have very large stones. This is a locally quarried stone. Fairmont Park, Quarry Park, here in the Heights were used for many, many decades to produce this stone. And unfortunately, it has not been made in about 110 years, which didn't leave me really a whole lot of options if I wanted to sort of bring the cesspit up to the top and make it a visible feature in the landscape. Fortunately, people dump this stuff in the street in my neighborhood. They do projects, they rip it out, they're throwing it on the side of the road as trash. I pick it up and I'm in business and I'm able to do something with it. And I figured I could make it work as a rubble stone masonry. I dry laid everything together. I got my mortar out. It's 5 o'clock after work. How much time could this possibly take? I'll knock this out in about an hour. After about 3 hours, and the sun more than having gone down, I was done. So I went out the next morning. I antiqued the joints, cleaned them a little bit, just a little soft brush just to get the mortar smears off. And yeah, this is a lime mortar right here. You can't really do this with a big box store Portland cement mortar. Just keep that in mind. But with a lime mortar, you can always go back and tool it a little bit and really get the look that you want. Lesson number 5 is keeping the story consistent. So I had done this other dry well on the other side. Not terribly exciting. Didn't find a cesspit. Didn't find a cistern. Didn't really find anything. But I realized I didn't want it to look like it didn't belong with the other pit detail and clean out on the other side. I had some extra mortar laying around. I had some extra rocks laying around. And I figured, you know what? Why not make them talk to each other? Why not make them have a similar design detail? So I I mortared it up. If nothing else, it keeps the weed whacker away from my clean out. And, the stuff is starting to grow in. I think I like it, but we'll see. I had done a lot of this other similar type of mortaring for my window wells, and I thought that sort of continued the story as well. So last and not least, just working on the overflow coming out of the cesspit, I saw an opportunity to bring back this retaining wall that had been lost and covered for the last 75 years. I pulled off all the poison ivy, poison oak, English ivy, and other stuff, and really sort of got into the weeds on it. And I discovered the end of the original retaining wall and nothing else there. And it occurred to me that when the house was built in 1852, they probably just dismantled the retaining wall right there. All of the big, large backing stones are part of my foundation, and all the rubble stone that was on the front is also part of my foundation. That's really kind of the story that's here. And, it's going to be part of the story as I figure out how to put it back together. So in closing, I got a number of lessons from this cesspit. I hope you enjoyed this story. Thank you so much.